Welcome to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
So today we're digging into what's going on inside Samsung's next foldable phones.
The Galaxy Z Flip 7 and the Z Fold 7, specifically the chips.
Exactly, the silicon heart. We've got a bunch of articles, reports, some speculation, some pretty solid analysis, it seems.
Yeah, lots to sift through.
Our mission really is to cut through all that, figure out what chips are actually likely to be in there.
And why Samsung might be going that route.
Yes, why make those choices? And, what does it all mean for you, the person maybe thinking about buying one?
Right. And the latest reports do seem to paint a clearer picture than some of the earlier rumors.
Okay, good. So let's jump right in. What's the main story for the Z Flip 7? What chip are we expecting there?
Well, this is where it gets interesting. For the Flip 7, the latest info points towards a split strategy.
A split. Okay.
Yeah, not the same chip everywhere.
How does that break down?
So the reports are saying Samsung plans to use its own chip, the Exynos 2500,
Okay.
but mainly for the domestic market, so South Korea.
Right, home turf.
Exactly. But for other places like North America, the plan seems to be the Snapdragon 8 Elite.
Got it. So Flip 7, Exynos in Korea, Snapdragon pretty much everywhere else. What about the Fold 7, the big one?
That one seems much simpler, actually. Reports suggest the Fold 7 will likely get the Snapdragon 8 Elite globally.
Ah, okay. No split there.
Doesn't look like it, no. Uniform approach for the Fold.
So the Flip 7 is really where the chip drama is happening. You mentioned earlier rumors, though. What was the word on the street before these latest reports came out?
Well, there was some earlier speculation, yeah. Some thought the Z Flip 7 might actually ship only with the Exynos 2500.
Oh, entirely Exynos.
Yeah, the thinking behind that was, mainly cost saving.
Right, using their own in-house chip to bring down the manufacturing bill. Makes sense.
Totally. It fits with Samsung wanting to, rely less on external suppliers like Qualcomm for these really key parts.
Okay, so that was the old rumor.
Yeah.
But now,
Well, what's interesting now is that the analysis also mentions that the Snapdragon 8 Elite version of the Flip 7 has reportedly passed all its internal tests.
so they've tested the Snapdragon version and it's good to go.
Seems so, including the really important network connectivity stuff. It's apparently ready.
That's a big deal. Moving from maybe all Exynos to definitely some Snapdragon, and it works.
Exactly.
So why? Why the split now? What's the thinking behind putting different chips in the same phone model, depending on the region?
If you piece together what the sources are saying, there are a few big drivers from Samsung's side. Number one is definitely reducing that Qualcomm dependence.
And the cost, presumably.
Oh, yeah. Huge cost factor. Get this. The allocation processor, the AP, the main chip, is reportedly a massive chunk of the cost to build a smartphone, maybe up to 30%.
30%. Just for the main chip. Wow.
Yeah. So if Samsung uses its own Exynos, that directly cuts down how much they have to spend buying chips from outside.
Makes perfect sense.
And one report specifically links this push to Qualcomm apparently hiking their prices, maybe as much as 30% year over year.
Whoa, another 30% jump on something that's already maybe a third of the cost.
Exactly. So
Wow.
you can see why finding an alternative like their own Exynos becomes pretty urgent.
No kidding. That really puts pressure on the margins.
Yeah.
Okay, so cost saving is huge. What else?
Well, this is also seen as a really important move to boost Samsung's own Exynos business.
Give their own chip division a win.
Precisely. Because this would actually be the first time an Exynos chip powers one of their flagship foldable phones.
Really? First time? Okay.
Yeah. So analysts are looking at this as maybe, a turning point, a potential revival for Exynos after some tough time.
What kind of tough times?
The reports mention that Samsung's chip design division, System LSI, and their manufacturing division, the Foundry,
Yeah.
apparently faced some pretty big losses in the first quarter of 2025. And part of that was supposedly because the Exynos 2500 didn't make it into the global Galaxy S25 series earlier.
Ooh, okay. So the chip was ready, or getting ready, missed the S25 launch globally, and now they really need to put it somewhere important.
You got it. They need a big design win to show it works, to help those internal teams financially and, reputationally.
And there's competition too, right?
Yeah.
How's Exynos doing the market overall?
Not great. According to one report, it apparently had only about 4% market share late last year, Q4 2024, which is neck and neck with Huawei's Silicon, basically.
So tiny share, getting it into a flagship foldable, even just in Korea, is a big statement then.
A very big statement. Vital for showing it's capable and maybe starting to claw back some market share.
Okay, so summarizing, it's about saving money on Qualcomm chips, boosting their own struggling chip divisions with a flagship placement, and maybe turning around the Exynos brand image.
That seems to be the core of it. And there's one more piece.
Oh, yeah.
The reports also say that Samsung's engineers, both design and manufacturing, have been working really hard lately to improve the Exynos 2500.
Improve how?
Both its actual performance and, crucially, the yield rates.
Yield rates, that's how many good chips they get from each production run.
Exactly. Better yields mean lower costs per chip, too. So these improvements seem to have gotten the Exynos 2500 to a point where Samsung feels it's good enough for a flagship, at least to start in their home market.
Okay, so the Exynos is supposedly viable now, at least for Korea. But if it's ready, why not use it everywhere? Why still lean on the Snapdragon 8 Elite for most of the world and for the Fold 7?
Well, the Snapdragon is framed as the tried and tested option.
The safe bet.
Pretty much, it's a known quantity globally. Strong performance, reliable across all sorts of different networks worldwide. That's super important for a global flagship launch.
Can't risk issues in major markets.
Right. And it's apparently in high demand at Samsung, probably because it just delivers that top-tier performance customers expect, especially in premium phones.
And as you said, it passed all their tests.
Passed with flying colors, it seems. It's validated, ready to go.
So reliable, performs well, globally accepted.
Yeah.
But it comes back to cost, doesn't it? Using Snapdragon isn't cheap for Samsung.
Absolutely not. That's the trade-off. The analysis points out that sticking with the pricier Snapdragon 8 Elite for the Flip 7 outside Korea, well, it could squeeze Samsung's profits. Or they might have to pass that extra cost onto the customer, meaning potentially a higher price tag for the Flip 7 in North America and other regions.
Oof. So potentially you could pay more for the Snapdragon version than someone in Korea pays for the Exynos version.
That's certainly a possibility flagged in the analysis, yeah.
Okay, let's try and wrap this picture up then. From these reports, Z Flip 7 looking like a split Exynos in Korea, Snapdragon elsewhere, Z Fold 7, simpler story, probably all Snapdragon everywhere.
That's the current consensus, seems like.
And the drivers are pretty clear, trying to cut those high Qualcomm costs, giving their own Exynos division a desperately needed boost and a showcase.
Right, leveraging those recent chip improvements.
While still relying on the proven, reliable Snapdragon where they feel they need it, especially globally and for the top-tier Fold.
Exactly, it's a balancing act.
But it's a balancing act with real implications for you, the potential buyer.
Definitely. Besides the possible price difference, there's always that question, will the performance be identical? The sources don't confirm any difference, but one does mention, the risk that customers might feel they overpaid if the Exynos version isn't perceived as being just as good.
It's always the shadow hanging over these split-chip strategies, isn't it?
Yeah.
The perception, even if not the reality sometimes.
It is.
So the reports really show Samsung navigating some complex internal business needs while trying to launch these global flagships. It leads to a final thought, maybe?
Yeah.
Considering this analysis, this split strategy for the Flip 7 versus the unified one for the Fold 7, how might this whole approach actually affect how people perceive the value and the performance of these new foldables?
A good question.
And maybe even more fundamentally, what does this specific decision really tell us about where the Exynos program actually stands right now and what its future might look like?
Yeah. Something definitely to think about as we wait for the official launch.